Hey everybody, what's up? It is Patrick from Magnetic Nerds, and today's project, Dragonbone dagger from Skyrim. And for all of you keeping score at home, here's a list of everything I used to make this project. I found the file for this print on Thingiverse. That link is in the description below. The printing deets for this project were as follows. I used Atomics Gray PLA. It was conveniently sliced into 3 parts, so I didn't have to do any monkeying with it myself, and it took about 18 hours to print all 3 pieces. The Prusa finished up doing its part of the project, so I pulled the 3 pieces off the print bed and was on to gluing. Gluing these pieces together, I used Welding's plastic cement. Some people may call it acrylic cement or a plastic welder. At the end of the day, it is a solvent that is going to melt a little bit of the plastic together, so you're actually fusing the pieces together as opposed to just straight up gluing them. You create a much stronger bond than if you're using super glue. With a pretty egregious seam line that went around the hilt, I used a technique called plastic welding to help fill in that seam, close the gap. Basically, all I'm doing is brushing on glue around the seam line, and that's going to cause that plastic to melt, fill in the seam. There were some pretty aggressive layer lines all over this dagger. So I used deluxe plastic putty to fill in the seam lines, to fill in the bigger imperfections on, flat surfaces, things of that nature. To smooth out the putty, I just used plain old water. Do you guys have a favorite weapon from Skyrim? Let me know down below. Maybe that's next on the docket. I even had to break out the metal files to further knock down some raised areas, the bumps, the ridges. After the putty cured, I went over it with a rough grit sandpaper. And then once all that was done, I went over the entire piece with XTC 3D to further cover up seam lines, cover up layer lines, hide imperfections, the whole 9 yards. With the resin cured, it was on to your standard priming and sanding gauntlet that you see every 3D printed piece get. I went outside, used an automotive filler primer, came inside, sanded it smooth, went back outside, primed it some more, came back inside, sanded it yet again, rinse, wash, repeat. Pretty standard process for a 3D print. Once I made it through my sanding and priming gauntlet, it was on to painting. Color of choice for this piece, the handle and all the metal parts were PlatFX's stone armor. I gave it 2 coats of that. The blade for this dagger, this was probably the funnest part about this whole project. Given that it is supposed to be dragon bone, creating a bone look for a blade, I had a lot of fun with it. And it started with, I left layer lines in the blade from the 3D printing process. I felt it helped sell it, the fact that this was a sawed piece of bone. And then I went through and gave it just a base coat of white. And then I went through with several washes of browns, tans, yellows, really give it that weathered bone kind of a look. And then came through with a bright iridescent silver and just did some dry brushing, pull out some highlights. The final bit of this project was I went through with a cold, very bright white along the cutting edge, and I can give it that, you do that with when you're doing a metal blade, the cutting edges are always a brighter, more polished steel. Well, I guess, for lack of a better term, you get a brighter, more polished bone. Just one little detail to help finish off the project. I'm super happy with how this turned out. The weathering I did to make the blade look like bone, I'm going to toot my own horn and say I did a pretty darn good job with it. I am ecstatic how that aspect of it turned out. And it filled a need. We had a new cosplay, he needed a weapon, and I couldn't think of a better weapon for a ranger than the dragon bone dagger. And as always, like, subscribe, hit the little bell. I'll see you guys next time.